Thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Tom Vander. I'm CEO at Getting Smart. I'll be moderating your session today on adding purpose to personalized learning. We'll be joined by Dr. Sasha Barab from Arizona State University, Renée Dawson, principal at Brambleton Middle in Loudoun County near Washington, D.C., and Nate McClennen, who's the head of innovation at Teton Science Schools. He also leads a national network of place-based schools called the Place Network. Hey, Renée and Nate, great to have you guys join today.
Yeah, good to be here.
Great to be here. Very excited.
So we're meeting at an interesting time, Renée and Nate. We're joining really in the middle of educating in crisis, primarily a global pandemic, but we actually have layers of crisis happening around the world, and teachers and school leaders like Renée are tired and a little frazzled at nearing the end of this first semester of the 2021 school year. We're going to talk about today about strategies for creating a sense of purpose to personalized learning, and we'll talk particularly about strategies for engaging learners in this particularly challenging time when many people feel disconnected and without that sense of purpose that may be more present when they're in a physical school setting. I invited Renée to join us for this session in part because she teaches in this remarkable school district that has a mission which is about empowering all students to make a meaningful contribution to the world. I really love that mission statement, and Renée, would love to have you say more about that mission statement. I wonder, why does Loudoun County have a mission statement focused on contribution, and what does it look like at a good day at your middle school? How do you try to live out that mission?
Well, one of the things that's very exciting about that mission statement is it was a community endeavor in its creation. So there were student participants who helped in creating that, community members. And what we knew and realized was very important was for our students to have authenticity in their learning experience and to really have them be prepared for the future. And so one way that we could do that was them realizing the value of contribution and us providing tools for those students to really realize that mission statement of empowering all students to make meaningful contributions to the world. So one of the things that we did as a division is we had 3 strategic goals that really kind of enveloped that. And that was really around the profile of a graduate and having those 5 C's, one of which is contribution, and really anchoring our work to that. A second one was really trying to empower staff agency and coming from a place of continuous growth and improvement and high-performing teams, and providing our teachers and our staff in general with tools to do that. And then that third statement was, how do we provide effective and efficient learning for our students? And that was really leveraging our work with personalized learning, with project-based learning, and things like that to really support that mission statement. So what you would see if you walked in the doors, typically at Brambleton Middle School, is you would see our students engaging in inquiry. You would see exploration. You would see them using the resources in and outside of our building, working with community partners around authentic learning experiences and driving questions to support the way that our kids learn, exploration and inquiry. That's what I think you'd see.
That sounds exciting. Renée, we're going to come back and ask you for a couple specific examples, but Nate, I wonder if you could give us a couple examples of what what that might look like at Teton Science School.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And thanks, Renee, for the overview. It's super exciting to see what you're doing there. So we approach this idea of contribution and purpose through the lens of place. So we think of everything about how students can have the agency to build community, the agency to make a difference in their local communities, their regional communities, national and global communities. We center our model around 6 core principles that we call the principles of place-based education. Teton Science Schools is a nonprofit, and we run our own school, a graduate program, and consult and work with schools around the country, as well as a network. So using these principles, we think about how do we, like the same language that Renee is thinking about, how do we get students asking good questions? How do we use design thinking to solve pertinent and relevant opportunities and challenges? And how do we essentially use community as a classroom so the students see more relevance, more engagement, and ultimately realize that at an early age, they can make a difference in their community and find that purpose. So we base it on these 6 core principles. And then Tom, if you want to switch to the next slide. So we articulated these along with Emily Leaptag and Tom as a lead in this Power of Place book that we wrote. It's a great precursor to the book that Tom just released on difference making. And really, place-based education is how do we integrate learning to increase engagement, learning outcomes, and community involvement? And in the long run, how do we do that to build agency in these students? How do we do this in an equitable way so every student has the opportunity to make a difference? And how do we build stronger communities along the way? So we see this intersection of place and purpose as really, really important as we start from a ground up exploration.
I'll just note that book is really written around these 6 design principles. We think they offer a really terrific architecture for schools that can help create deeper learning and more purposeful learning. Dr. Sasha Barab from Arizona State has joined us today. Sasha, we're talking about learning with a sense of purpose. I've heard you describe that as both an art and a science. How can we help create more meaningful context and meaningful tasks for young people so that they feel like they're learning with a sense of purpose?
Yeah, just to jump in, Tom, thanks. Took me a little while to figure out how to get here. My work over the last couple of decades has been really focused on how do you help kids understand why they're learning, and it changes what they learn, even if the content remains the same on the other side. But if you can position it in the form of goals that they, and more importantly, they and their peers are invested in kind of achieving, it just transforms the meaning of the conceptual tools that we want kids to understand. A lot of my work initially, Tom, was using video games and 3D immersive worlds, because in those worlds, we start you off with a goal. And then, the way I like to think about it is in the game, when it's well designed, I'm an engaged and purposeful learner who's seeking data and tools to help me be more successful, right? And that's awesome. And then I'm using data to kind of say, whoa, what did I do wrong? But it's all in relation to a goal that I'm trying to achieve and a purpose that I'm invested in. I think in schools, we kind of put the cart before the horse by saying, we don't want to give you any purpose because we're worried that's going to limit the different ways you're going to use what you're learning. But what we're finding is it actually undermines the meaning and the value of what you're learning. I don't know if that was useful.
It's helpful. Sasha, do you buy the idea? We just interviewed the head of the Design 39 campus, a beautiful K-8 school where they refer to teachers as learning experience designers. Do you appreciate that idea that teachers, as part of their core job, should be learning experience designers? And if so, how can they incorporate purpose into that task?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 levels. One is you're designing for the emergence of an experience. You're not designing the experience, and that's really important. Like, game designers are really clear that their product is not what they're doing. Their product is the user being successful in doing things with what they built. I think teachers, as a teacher for many years in Connecticut, I spent a lot of time thinking about my designing for as an invitation to invite the learner into situations where they would leverage, or as Clay Christian would say, hire the conceptual ideas I wanted them to know to
Right.
goals they cared about. So at a very deep level, they are designing an invitation for someone else to take up and use so that the content now has meaningful value in their life. And it's a really hard line. You got to create a lot of structure, but it's this dance between structure and agency. If you don't have structure, the world's too open and they'll never connect the purpose with your tool. So you got to have a purpose that's constrained enough that they need to understand the concept of eutrophication in order to make sense of this water quality area. And that's really hard to do. In games, we can build a whole kind of problematic river with not enough oxygen, and then you have to leverage the tool to make sense of it. In the world, it's harder. So I get that the challenge is big, but we have to do it.
Renee, does that sound right to you?
It absolutely does. Yes, I could not agree more. I think that is really what anchors the work that you do. It creates purpose, and we refer to our teachers here as facilitators of learning. And learning is an experience for our kids, and it has to have purpose and structure.
That's beautifully said. Thank you, Renee. Nate, these design principles are not only key to the schools at Teton Science and to your outdoor education program there, but to this growing network of schools that you've created around the country. You call it the Place Network. These are rural micro schools that share your outcome framework and design principles. How do you see them leveraging the power of place to bring purpose to learning?
Yeah, so when we work with schools, we're in about 16 schools, around 9 states right now, and eventually we'll grow to 100 schools. And the goal for us is to have a model that really is generated from, while we use the same language across the board, how do we generate based on local assets, local resources, and all the local knowledge that already exists within the teachers and students and the community members of a place. And so from that, they can drive purpose around what do we do in this place to jump into opportunities that might present themselves, really connecting to what Renee and Sasha were talking about. So just a specific example. So when we work with schools, we put our 6 core principles in the middle, and we wrap things like competency-based and personalized and project-based around the outside. An example in a school in Western Idaho that we work closely with is their entire middle school curriculum for the whole year was building a tiny house in response to a shortage of housing in the area. And then they sold the house at the end of the year and used the proceeds to fund their playground rehabilitation project, which was in a park in the center of the town, for the next year's project. And so I think a lot about stickiness of purpose. When students find that they are needed and wanted and there's relevance and they have ownership, the stickiness of that experience will last way longer than most other learning experiences that occur in schools. And it's not to say that they need to be able to read and write and do mathematics. All those things are just tools for a greater end, this idea of purpose and contribution.
I really shared Nate's enthusiasm for rural micro schools. Nate and I think this network could be the seed to reinvigorate hundreds of schools. It could even be a framework to develop hundreds of new schools for communities that have over the years lost a high school. It's now quite possible to run a very good high school for 30, 50, 80 students as part of a national network. So Nate, we're really excited about the work that you're doing. Sasha, you've created what I think is the coolest learning platform out there that both is highly personal, but also highly social, and it helps young people, sometimes old people, really discover and live into a sense of purpose. Tell us about Thrivecast.
You are there, Tom. Never mind. Sorry, you are navigating aficionado. So a big part of our work is that we believe deeply that kids need to know why they're learning something and do it around a goal that they care about, which I think Renee and I were saying before. And so we wanted to build a platform that was mobile first, that kind of started with what Clay Christensen would call a job to be done, as opposed to a content to be consumed. So we really wanted to position the content in the form of goals that the learner could then take up to make progress in an area, whether it was learning science, whether it was around, learning kind of SEM skills, or whatever the content is. And so we ended up at a core kind of value proposition. It was, how do we get more people to unlock unrealized potential? And we know the problem is not simply about content and desire, because a lot of people have a desire and have access to content, but they're still not kind of unlocking their full potential to go forward. And part of that's because people grow when they feel inspired, supported, valued, and validated. But much of our positioning of content in schools is more about transmitting expert content to be consumed for a grade. So if you go forward, Tom, on the next one. And so we wanted to kind of move from this model up top as an online platform where you have person consuming content and then getting a grade, to have person first positioned around a goal or an idea of what they might do, then looking at other people's ideas, connecting with them like you would connect, on other platforms, then growing their skills once they had some purpose in play, and then kind of manifest those skills in relation to their goals by sharing it back to the community to inspire others as part of their connect. So it's a really different focus when we think about what an online platform is, when it's about connecting and thriving. And I'll come back to that in a second if you want to go to the next one, Tom. So, at a pragmatic level, it's mobile first, but we can do it we want it to be where people are going, but also some people are much more comfortable sitting in front of a desktop when they're working on their kind of learning moment. So we had to have both. But the idea is every module or job to be done on the platform starts with, this is the goal. So we're starting with why. Then we're connecting with other examples, and we have little meters that are filling up as you connect to other people with emoji or comments. Then you're growing your skills, and this is very traditional, using drag and drop, multiple choice, watching videos. So that's kind of like the normal LMS interactive modes, although we have other ones that are outside as well. And then you share your story back on the apply stage. So then, Tom, if you go forward. And so really what we wanted to do is and you're doing this in the context of a group of other people who are also working with you. And so we wanted to bring together two concepts that we think are really missing from many of the learning systems online and often face-to-face that are out there, which is thriving. Again, creating value with what I'm learning is all we mean by thriving. It's about creating value, not consuming content. And belonging, because we feel when it comes to thriving and actually using things in the world, that requires a lot more confidence and commitment than just consuming content. And what we've learned is, that thriving is a team sport, and people, unless they're, really, really overly confident, are not always comfortable going out and putting something out in the world that's their own idea. So it's very powerful to position the learner's achievement of a goal as the content and the focus, as opposed to your innovation. But it's also very intimidating if they don't feel supported in that context. And I think that more generally, we need to think deeply about schools, especially in these times, but more generally around how are we creating opportunities for kids to thrive, meaning use in a purposeful way what they're learning, and how are we doing that in a way that's connected to other people? I don't know if that helps, Tom.
That's great. Thank you, Sasha. I was so excited about the work that Sasha's leading as Arizona State and by school districts like Loudoun County and schools like Teton Science. That my new book is called Difference Making, and in that book we highlight 30 different community organizations and 30 schools and a dozen colleges that have this idea of putting purpose at the heart of learning. And as Loudoun County says, helping young people live into being a contributor to their family, their neighborhood, and their community, really embracing this new sense of mutuality. Let me mention a couple of the schools that are in the book. The first one is One Stone in Boise, Idaho. This is a small micro school that uses design thinking and project-based learning, but it's its mission and motto for both the school and the after-school program is really to create an army for good. And these young people really are changing the nature of the Boise community. The first graduating class of the school 2 years ago completed 400 projects, many of which really directly benefited the local community. And they're building out their learning experiences on Sasha's Thrivecast platform. Sasha, what else could you tell us about One Stone as an example of a school that really enables purposeful learning?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that were really powerful that we learned through them. When we started the contract, Tom, it was we were going to build their content for them. And we went out and we interviewed kids to really understand how they were making progress now, what tools were they using, and what was really valued. As we started to talk to the kids, it became so clear that their staff and their kids were so in touch with what they wanted to do and what they needed, that the relationship shift almost overnight to, we're not going to build them basically 10 modules and a couple collections. They're going to build a couple hundred by themselves, and we're just going to give them feedback about how they might think about some. So I think what was so powerful is when you put powerful tools in the hands of really dedicated students and staff who are thinking alternatively and know what they want to do, we basically just got out of their way and just totally reframed the contract and just said, okay, you're not going to just do these 10 things. You're going to do as much as you want, but you're going to do it. And I've just I go check in there, Tom, just to see how it's going. And it's just mind blowing, like how much they've actually produced. And now they've started making it available to other schools as a pilot, which is really cool. So I think the other part about it that's really interesting is in our model, we kind of build the content and then the kids share their stories, and then their stories become the content through algorithms and feeds that recommend it to other people. I won't go into it deeply. What they did that was so interesting is by having the students help build the content is that the imagery throughout all their content is of kids, it's of them. And so I think there's a certain comfort that this isn't just coming from these experts outside who we have to appease by using their stuff. It felt more like we are the innovators, we are creating our future, we are in charge. And so it'll be exciting to see how that looks. But whenever I show it, people are like, wow, that's like got kids all over it. That looks so different. I'm like, oh, that's what they did, and it's working for them. So I don't know if that helps.
That's great, Sasha. We both are big fans of their advisory system, and as you mentioned, they're publishing their Living in Beta curriculum, which is a great 9th grade curriculum. It can be used several times in a cycle in high school, but it really helps young people deeply understand who they are, what their strengths and interests are, and it creates a purposeful learning platform for them to experience high school. They are, by the way, looking for a couple more schools that want to pilot that Living in Beta curriculum in January. So contact me if you're interested, or check out onestone.org to learn more. It's really an exciting adventure that's powered in part by Sasha's Thrivecast platform.
And I think throughout all their design is the sense that, again, it's an invitation. It's not saying this is what you need to know in Living in Beta. It said, here's a tool. How do you see this tool operates in your life, and how could you leverage this tool to be more successful in living in a beta, meaning basically a rapidly changing, digitally connected planet? And I think they did a really good job of creating enough structure, as Renee said, but also allowing for a lot of ownership to come in. Because if you don't leave that interpretive space, there's no place for me to step in. I think the other part on all these is their culture is a culture that allows and encourages the youth to use I statements in their work. And as we've been looking at other places, we took that for granted. And so, Tom, you get these places where the kids are supposed to create their story, but they're really like, there's no I statements in their stories. And what they're really trying to do is show the teacher that they understand the content, rather than share their experience thriving in a form that is uniquely theirs, but also adheres to the criteria of whatever that tool was supposed to be produced.
Right. A great example of some unlearning that needs to happen to unlock powerful learning, right?
Yeah.
This is Odyssey STEM. It's in the Paramount School District in Los Angeles County. Nate, do you know Odyssey STEM?
I don't know it.
It's inspired in part by your work, Nate, because this is an urban school that combines big picture learning and the altitude learning platform into project-based learning that's really student-centered and purpose-filled. Nate, what you'd appreciate about Odyssey is this is the best urban garden program that we've ever seen. They borrowed from the Muse School, the Cameron's Muse School up in Malibu. Actually took some staff from the Muse School and created a beautiful garden. But it's a school that's really filled with a sense of purpose and is student-centered, community-connected, and project-based. So just a demonstration that public school districts in highly challenging circumstances can create this kind of purpose-filled education. Iowa Big in Cedar Rapids, Iowa is the partnership of 4, soon to be 5 public school districts. Young people usually spend a half a day at Iowa Big, where they engage in big interdisciplinary, often community-connected projects that they co-construct with a teacher. So a great example of the collaboration of a set of school districts to create really student-centered, community-connected course of study for young people. The best college example of this, maybe besides Arizona State, is Olin College in Needham, Massachusetts. Olin.edu. It's a purpose-built engineering school. It only has about 400 learners, but it's the best example of entrepreneurial mindset and hands-on experiential learning from day one. I also want to note that Arizona State and Olin are members of the Keen Network. This is 50 of America's best engineering schools that teach entrepreneurial mindset. It's engineeringunleashed.org, a great example of bringing engineering to life by helping young people spot opportunity and deliver value, making their engineering career really purposeful. I want to turn things back over to Renée and just let her.
Tom, can I do one thing on that too?
Go ahead, Sasha.
Kern has also supported us to create some collections of growth opportunities in our platform around purpose, voice, character, and entrepreneurship. And those are now available to schools who are interested and want to use them for free because Kern got behind it. So that's another opportunity that we can talk about. And if people are interested, just email me.
And Sasha, you're having great success using some of those modules with youth that are in the juvenile justice system. Is that
also
right?
Used with youth in the juvenile justice system. So we're using them in public schools. We have them in some Catholic schools now, and we're using them in juvenile detention centers as part of a new way of thinking about the opportunity/responsibility of probation and detention, even diversion, is to help use the arrest as an opportunity to support positive change of the youth. And I think there's a lot of talk right now how that might become a part of the requirements of all counties, that the arrest comes with a responsibility for the county to help the youthful offender not turn this into a kind of identity defining moment in their life, but actually help them get the support. And I think probation officers have been doing that for a long time, but I think we're getting more serious about what do we know about helping people make change when they have certain criminogenic risk factors. So probably more than you wanted, Tom.
You can learn a bit more about Thrivecast at thrivecast.org, or you can contact Sasha at Arizona State. But it's great to see Kern supporting your program, Keen, Olin, Project Lead the Way, a lot of purpose-filled and STEM education around the country. Renée, I want to give you a chance to dig in and give us a couple more examples of what purposeful learning looks like in Loudoun County. You're a big urban/suburban district just northeast of Washington, D.C. Give us a couple more examples of what's a good day at Loudoun look like.
So some of the exciting work that we've done, like I said before, has really been around anchoring our thinking to empowering all students to make meaningful contributions to the world. So one of the things that we do is we have an entire part of our division that is based around community connections. And we have a lot of support and resources with division instructional facilitators that go in and collaborate with schools around project-based learning, personalized learning, to really kind of empower our staff and really lead into that staff agency. One of the things that I shared was and there are many examples, and I get excited when we get to talk about these kinds of things, was one of our elementary schools, Goshen Post Elementary. And so they had, and that's on the next slide, this was one of the projects, and this really shows how our teachers are really facilitators of learning. So our students learned about Virginia watersheds and the ecosystem, and they saw that there was a problem, right? And so what they did was they did some research and realized that shark finning really impacted the environment. And so what they did is they came up with a proposal. They went through all of the elements of PBL and they presented it, and they reached out to a congresswoman, and they actually impacted change. And this bill was passed because of some elementary students. So this is the kind of work that is happening. On the next slide, this is one of the things that I was really excited about. If we go to the next one, yes. This is one that I was excited about for Brambleton Middle School. One of the things that I know is important is really equipping our teachers with tools and an understanding about how this can really elevate and prepare our students. This kind of thinking can really prepare our students for the future. So I piled 100 staff on buses, sent them to 6 different locations with different businesses, and said, and I'd been corresponding with them really throughout the summer to talk about the profile of a graduate. What kind of people are you seeking in your organization, and what can we do to prepare our students to be there? And so they met with our staff and did some amazing professional learning. And then what later happened is we ended up with a partnership with some of these businesses to support and extend learning in our classrooms. So one of those was Apple. We created the iJournalist program here at Brambleton Middle School, and our students learned how to do B-roll film. They learned how to do storyboards, and they really expanded on that English curriculum, and they created a driving question. They interviewed for the League of Innovative Schools, Digital Promise. They came in and our students conducted the interviews, and they created a nice documentary that they could share to really memorialize that whole process for Loudoun County. And all of this was based on inquiry and exploration and student interest. And what it did is it leveled the playing field for all students to feel successful. Every single student had an opportunity to participate in some capacity this kind of experience, and it kind of added that layer of excitement and energy. And the great thing is our staff had already connected with these businesses beforehand, so there was a partnership. And what we really think of is this idea that we have to have our students prepared for the future. And it might look different, but we have to equip our staff with the tools so that they can implement it and facilitate that learning experience. And then we have to give our students that opportunity to really tap into some authenticity in their learning. The next slide really is about our community connections, where we have our Academies of Loudoun, which we have basically 3 different groups housed in there. We have the Academies of Engineering and Technology. We have Monroe, which is a CTE center, and then we have the Academy of Science. And basically we have students that are represented from all of our high schools that go to the Academies of Loudoun, and they have that opportunity to really do some deep dive and exploration with project-based learning. And again, those connections with businesses and partnerships. All that ties back to that authenticity and that contribution.
Sasha, how does that sound to you?
It sounds amazing. Like, I mean, all those different projects and the way you're positioned and even the brand you built and what it means. Like, I don't know.
The teachers loved the bus trip. That was a fantastic way. It was a surprise, and it generated excitement and purpose for staff also. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun.
I do think, Tom, that some of our biggest struggles as we bring in new innovations is how to help staff who are already busy. COVID has really made that even harder to not feel overwhelmed all the time. And it's also created almost a little bit of resistance to expanding kind of how I do my job. And so I think that what you're doing to really empower staff is so necessary whenever you're bringing any of these innovations into a place, is thinking through that ownership. So I agree deeply with that, Tom.
Yes, those are great examples. Renee, I often talk about community-connected, project-based learning, but you're living it out every day. That's very exciting.
I also think that there's just what Renee has done is the teachers become students, right? So they're learning along and experiencing that. I think too often when we start teaching, we forget what it's like to be a learner. And when school districts and schools can implement teachers as learners as a central mantra, that makes a huge difference because they can walk in the shoes of their own students, and then they have their own aha moments. Like, what does PBL look like? What does it mean to do place-based education? What does it mean to be assessed with competency-based? All these kind of experiences they've usually never experienced as students. So how do we help them become learners?
Renee, no, I appreciate that, Nate. I want to ask Renee about that. So what Nate said is true and exciting for some teachers, but it can be scary as heck for other teachers to both walk into unknown community settings, but to also walk into project-based learning with these big, complicated questions that don't have known answers. I think both of those require intellectual humility to be a learner right alongside with young people. Renee, what's that been like for your team?
So, it's funny because as a school, we do a lot of branding. So, like I gave my teachers some shades with the 5 C's on it over the summer before they walked out, and we did some hashtag BAM Summer Jam, and I asked them a driving question, the teachers, and I said to them, how can we as facilitators of learning cultivate a community of future contributors? So I want you guys to think about this over the summer. And so we kind of primed the pump with the teachers over the summer where they could just kind of think about it. And then I met them where they were. We really have to meet our teachers where they are and celebrate when they make a small change, and walk with them along the journey. And that's where our division instructional facilitators come in as a resource, where they meet and we really kind of harness the power of our collaborative teams working together to do some innovative things, and to think outside of the box. And we celebrate that. But we meet our teachers where they are, and then we encourage them to try things. This year, one of the things that we did that was really cool is I reached out to some other businesses that have had to do the pivot for COVID, and they've had to change the face of how they function. And I've said, what were the things that you were able to do in your organization to be successful? And then I set those businesses up with my teachers, and we did another surprise tour, and they talked about how they changed, and my teachers got ideas and they collaborated. So it's just this idea of constantly setting the stage for it being an exciting experience. It might be overwhelming, but supporting our teachers with resources and creating a place where it is okay and it is expected for us to iterate. It is expected for us to fail forward, and it's okay. It's really about creating that culture.
That's really exciting, Renee. I'm a big fan of your superintendent, Eric Williams, and the way he's introduced contribution into your mission. Yeah. But what you're describing, Renee, sounds really, it sounds like it's very leader dependent. And we've all learned that you're a really skilled leader Do all the teachers in Loudoun have school leaders that are as gifted as you at creating these purposeful environments?
I would like to say that yes, they may not be. I'm a very enthusiastic principal.
We can tell that.
I'm an enthusiastic principal. I'm a kid principal. I'm a community principal. So I kind of laid that foundation when I opened the building. But I think one of the things that we are fortunate within Loudoun County is that we had that mission to really hang our hat on, and we've been given resources and tools, and how it looks at different schools might be different.
Right.
But I think all of us really have those resources available to us. I just happen to be like probably one of the more excited. I just get excited about it. It's great work. It's noble work. And it's something I'm passionate about for my kids, my community, and my teachers.
We really appreciate that. Nate, I want you to close us out here with making the connection between purpose and place. And I bet you could build on what Renée has just said about sort of taking advantage of your local context and who you are as a leader and as a team, but maybe connect place and purpose for us.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I every time we do these talks, Tom, I get inspired by everybody on the talk. So it's fantastic. So, and I keep thinking, before I just have some comments, is that we have 100,000 plus K-12 schools out there. And there's so many, we talk about the examples of this great work. And I'm thinking about how do we magnify and replicate and share over and over again so that every student has those experiences. But I've been thinking, you've used the word compliance and uniformity, and and then the inverse of if our current systems are reinforcing compliance and uniformity, the bigger systems. And then we have revolutionaries that are pushing in all sorts of margins. Renée and Sasha and Tom, you and our work and many, many others who are doing that. But the system still is pushing that. But we're not preparing our young people for this future of uncertainty, complexity, and mutuality. We don't know what the future is going to be. And we know it's going to be complex. We know it's going to be fairly uncertain. And this idea of mutuality, that we're dependent on one another, I think is an interesting step for schools to think about. And when we ask students to be difference makers and that be purposeful in their learning and contributors, we are exemplifying mutuality, that they're doing something to help someone else. It's not just for personal gain. It's not just for the I. It's about the we in the process. And they're developing skills, meaning they're developing their own skills, but they're mutually connected to others in their community. And so for me, if we can replicate that in every place, every community across the country and across the world, and equip every young person with difference-making skills, and also their teachers with the same difference-making skills, because I'm a deep believer that the teachers who are being asked to do this work are learning just as much as the students who are doing the work as well. And so that's where I think we enact change. And you add in tools that Sasha has created, and the leadership and community and culture work that Renée's done, and then suddenly we have models for really reimagining the future as a much brighter place that can deal with these uncertain, complex, and mutual type experiences. So I'm excited when I do these things.
Hey, Nate, you reminded me of another book I want to plug called We Are Crew. This came out from EL Education, eleducation.org. Ron Berger and his team just wrote this. It's the best book on secondary advisory systems out there. And what's remarkable about this book and about EL Education is what Nate referred to, this sense of mutuality, that their advisory cohort, they're in it together. They're there to help each other get to graduation. So in EL schools, it's not just you are on your own to get from the beginning to graduation. You're there as part of a crew where you've got each other's back. And so I love the sense of mutuality at the crew level, at the school level, at the community level. Great example of sort of leaning into that sense of mutuality. Sasha, closing thoughts on mutuality, purpose, the way you've seen that work out in different settings?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to kind of block the thinking that's going on after Nate did his, because it was really good. So I'll maybe go simpler, and I'll just say we spent a lot of time thinking about what kids need to know.
Yeah.
We've gotten really good at organizing that information in ways that make sense to us, to textbooks, to online LMSs. We spent much less time thinking about where are they going to go with what they know. And so when Nate talked about these kind of imagining new futures, I think kids need to look at school and its content is creating possibilities, creating purposes, helping them achieve and realize and being successful in futures they care about. So I think, yeah, it's great to know what we want kids to know. It's better to know where we want them to go, and or at least power them to think about where they want to go with what they're learning to know. And then lastly, when you brought up crew, who's going to help me get there? We just need to go beyond what do I need to know, and it's got to be where am I going and who's going to help me get there. And we don't leverage the beauty of our class structures, not class in the bad way of society, but classes that we have rooms of people together, for an hour a day who know each other and who can be supported by this champion to be successful, the teacher, right? And we don't leverage that intimacy and that sense of trust and that sense of belonging and that sense of inspiration they can bring. We just kind of put them all in there and let them each do their own thing. And that's just not how people thrive. It's how you consume content. It's not how you thrive in life, though.
I love that. And if anybody online has any questions or comments they want to add, feel free to jump in and add those in the Q&A line. Sasha, the thing that I most appreciate about Thrivecast is that you have found that that intersection between experiences that are highly personal and personalized, but also the sense of mutuality of learning in community. So I love the way your app architecture sort of leans into that space. As people online that are thinking about designing experiences and environments, is that the tension we should be looking for, this highly personalized but within a community of learners?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mentioned that personal relevance is really important, and we don't even play that up well in many classrooms. Great teachers do it all the time, but it's just not a priority. And during the online COVID stuff, it became even less. So I think personalized is really powerful. Like, why is this useful to me? But social relevance is such a big driver. Just think about your own life. Like, you have so much access to information, and you probably even care about that goal. But it's just to realize it, to activate it, to make it happen. Now, as kids are a little more compliant, and they're at a time in their life where they're kind of required, but we need to stoke that passion to go after those goals, to achieve their potential, to realize who they're going to be early, because otherwise it's going to be harder later. So I think there's a tension, Tom, there's a complementarity to this is what I want to do, and here's how other people are doing it well. And sometimes social relevance is a more authentic motivator for personal change than even my own personal lead. And it's certainly more motivating than good content. That is just not a motivator for change. If anything, I often feel inadequate when you present like, oh, that's a good workout routine. I'm like, wow, great. But I feel really worse now. Whereas when I see the other people in my Nike app who are running that day and they're talking about, hey, I haven't been in much, but I'm doing it today. And then back on, I'm like, I can do it today. So I think there's a very different way we need to thinking about unlocking human potential than getting content organized and transmitting it into these systems.
I'd love to have Renee and Nate both comment on social capital. Nate mentioned that in the chat line. I think all of us have read Julia Freeland-Fisher's great book, Who You Know. Julia argues that the size of your social network, your ability to activate that network for good, are at least as important developmental metrics as basic skills are. Nate, maybe you could make the connection between social capital, purpose, and academic success. Is that something that you guys focus on at Teton Science?
Yeah, I mean, we're thinking about, I think it's one of these big unknowns in terms of how do you incorporate it well in schools, but kind of a no-dub, because Project-based learning does this. Place-based education does this. We're getting
Right.
students out. They're finding their purpose, and they're connecting with real human beings in the community that are doing real projects. And so we're by default, human capital or social capital is being built. And I think Renee mentioned this idea that every student, it's an equity play as well, because every student gets to experience. It's not just in the after school or the summer experience. Every student has an opportunity, and because of that, they're all building their networks of social capital. I think what's elusive and what Christensen has started to think about, and Julia as well, is like, how do you accurately measure this? How can we help students see their growing portfolio of connections, and then also help the schools see that they're equitable across the board? Because some students will just inherently start, due to privilege, et cetera, will start with higher social capitals. How do we level the playing field? And so it's super intriguing for us and really connected to place-based and project-based and purposeful learning.
Renee, when you're building out community-connected projects, it sounds like you don't leave that to chance. Like, it looks like you are helping all young people build social connections, right?
Yes, it was interesting because one of the things that I knew was incredibly important was the community from the very beginning. And so I got stakeholder feedback. I had focus groups with parents. I had focus groups with students. I had focus groups with teachers. And we talked about the feedback that I got from everyone is we really want to be intentional with our use of time and how we are connecting. And so the kids, the teachers, and the community members came up with a tiered system of how we could have this collaborative process work, because maybe they might want to use somebody just to come in and perhaps be a guest speaker and talk about a particular topic that they're learning about. Maybe they wanted to do a full-on PBL project and create the driving question together with their tier 3, we call them BAM experts. Or maybe we want to have them work in station rotations and things like that. So I think that because we kind of laid the groundwork, and I was very intentional about having focus groups and each group having a voice. So whether it's student voice, whether it's teacher voice or community voice, everybody has a seat at the table. And then in terms of the access piece, one of the things that Loudoun County did was the device rollout and making sure that all of our students had access to the technology that they might need in the distance environment to be able to access some of the things that they might need to continue the work with the partnerships and meeting with different people. And we've adapted in the distance model, which is exciting. We are about to pivot.
Renee, you're so close to Washington, D.C. I think I'd like to nominate you for Secretary of Education. Yeah. Nate, would you support that idea?
Yeah, I'm 100% in support of it. Yep. Nominated.
Oh, you're awesome. I love everything about that answer, Renee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sasha, do you buy this argument that social capital matters?
I start with that assumption, yes.
Yeah.
Totally. And then Renee, I'm wondering what your pivot that you're about to do is. I was just curious. You kind of ended that, and I was like, what does that mean?
Well, so we're transitioning back into the hybrid model. So of course, we are going to be doing some concurrent teaching. So I sent out some invitations to my staff. I don't know if you guys can see this. I welcome them to Camp Switchback. We are the Bears. And they had little stops where they could do different professional learning experiences at each stop on the camping trip. Wow. And the teachers they're going on this camping trip, and it's a virtual camping trip, but we generated such excitement. We did these super cool videos. And all of this was really to kind of generate that excitement to get them ready for concurrent teaching. We know it's a heavy lift, but our superpower is our innovation. And so that's one of the things that we do. So they're going to Camp Switchback.
You're awesome, Renee. I love your branding panache. You're very good. All right, last minute, just closing thoughts on next steps around adding purpose. For me, it just strikes me that we're in a year where it's been awful operating in crisis, but maybe the silver lining is there's permission to try things. So I guess in closing, I would just invite folks that are listening, take permission, take the opportunity, invite kids into community-connected, purposeful, project-based learning. Nate, a closing thought or an invitation?
Yeah, I think the invitation for me is almost what you just said, is ask your students when they're staring at their Zoom screens and you're wondering what on earth is going on in their heads, as I watch my own 2 teenagers doing. Ask them what would be important to you right now, and then build off of that. And what's important in the community for them. So just ask and listen, I think, is the first step for me.
That's awesome. Sasha?
I guess to get back to purpose, start with why. Really help kids understand why they're learning something, and the why is not some example from the textbook. It's really about why would this matter to them, and really kind of ground that in there, and then to the extent possible, connect them with other people who are showing their examples of why, because it's so much more convincing when it comes from a peer than you're being sold it by a teacher.
I think this is particularly important as we begin this last month of the first semester. There's millions of kids with D's and F's looming on their report card. I just want to invite teachers around the country to get creative, to drop the script, to, as Nate and Renee and Sasha have said, ask the kids, connect to community, try a project, give kids an alternative way of developing and demonstrating their competencies. You'll all be happy that you did. Thanks for joining us, guys. We've had an awesome panel. Sasha Barab from ASU and the creator of thrivecast.org. We think it's one of the most interesting learning platforms out there. Nate McClennen from tetonscience.org and playschools.org. Check him out. And Renée Dawson, an awesome principal leader in Loudoun County Public Schools. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That was fun.
That was fun. This was great.